Thank you for tuning in to the Project Cure CRC Curecast. This is a live broadcast by the national nonprofit Colorectal Cancer Alliance, which exists to end this disease. My name is Diana Zepeda, and for the past 8 years, since I was 33, I've been a stage 4 metastatic colorectal cancer patient. If you know nothing about this disease, know this: it can happen to anyone, anytime, without symptoms. So if you're eligible for screening, get checked. Don't wait. The other thing I'd say is that not every colorectal cancer diagnosis is the same. Some cancers, like mine, spread before they're found or have traits that make them harder to treat. What's kept me alive for 8 years is chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. Lots of it. A few examples: I've had most of my liver surgically removed, had 3 lung surgeries, and a major operation that left me with a permanent colostomy. I'm grateful for these treatments and the science that made them possible. Because of science, my cancer can be treated like a chronic disease instead of a death sentence. But as powerful as science is, the work isn't finished. I've undergone countless treatments, but I've yet to see a cure. For many of us with advanced colorectal cancer, there is no cure. I'm incredibly grateful to be alive, but living with metastatic cancer today is not a race with a clear finish line. I've crossed the line. I've rung the bell multiple times, and still, the cancer came back. It could again. And that's why I'm here talking to you. I'm proud to be part of this Curecast, where the Colorectal Cancer Alliance is proving that science and determination together can deliver what every patient deserves: a cure.
I'm honored that incredible people like Diana have embraced the Alliance and our collective mission to end colorectal cancer. It has been 16 years since I joined this cause. I lost my mom to this disease on Mother's Day in 2009. And shortly after, gathered friends and family around our dining room table and shared this wild idea at the time to raise $500,000 to take on this disease. My dad's like, I don't have $500,000. And I said, well, we will raise that money. Well, I was a professional musician, not a leader of a huge nonprofit or a fundraiser, but I wasn't alone. People believed in this idea. They gave, they worked beside me and all of us. And that small effort became what was named Chris for Life, named after my dear mom. And later, we joined the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, merged with them in 2016, and together, alongside thousands of patients, survivors, caregivers, providers, volunteers, and advocates, we've built the world's largest nonprofit dedicated to ending this disease. And now we're building again. This broadcast focuses on Project Cure Colorectal Cancer, the Alliance's bold initiative to bring new treatments to patients in triple survival. Today, we'll share our plan, starting with the challenges that you face, and then the solutions that we all have to overcome for you. Our hope is simple: that you'll be inspired by our plan and take action to help us build a future free of this disease. So when you're ready, you can scan the QR code or go to colorectalcancer.org/curecrc and find ways to be part of the cure. We cannot do this alone. So what are we up against, right? And I know I'm speaking to you. You guys know these things, right? First, you, patients, caregivers, too often, let alone in the hardest moments of your lives. From diagnosis on, you're navigating a maze of choices and collecting information. Conflicting information. Many with advanced cancer never hear about the important clinical trials that could offer hope, or where to find experts to guide them, those second opinions, the best doctors in the world, right? Colorectal cancer is on track, unfortunately, to be the #1 cancer killer for men and women under 50. We owe every single patient clearer communication, better guidance, and greater support. Okay, second, clinical data, right? You hear these words, data. What does that mean? Well, it has hope, right? It is trapped, unfortunately, in lots of different places and silos, places like hospitals and pharma companies and research centers, right? It all contains a wealth of knowledge, yet so much of it remains inaccessible to the larger research community. The result? It means fewer matches to clinical trials, slower and fewer breakthroughs. And only one new first-line therapy has been approved for colorectal cancer in the last 15 years. That's one. Breast cancer has like 22 a year. Imagine the momentum if all of that data could work together safely, ethically, and in service of you, the patient. Third, patients are still waiting for new treatments, right? Burning time they don't have. We need these breakthroughs that come faster and hit this disease harder and last longer. But funding for laboratory science, the building blocks of progress and new ideas trails far behind other major cancers, sometimes by a factor of 5 or 6 per diagnosis. That funding gap costs us lives. And lastly, fourth, clinical trials, the engine of life-saving medicine, how we move things faster, are too few and too slow. Every delay means promising treatments sit idle. The lack of options and accessibility hurts patients at the worst time. Many patients turn to clinical trials when other options have been exhausted, or to find that there are none for them, or they do not qualify, or are too far away, or can't afford to get there. Today, fewer than 1 in 5 patients diagnosed with colorectal cancer will survive 5 years or longer. That is unacceptable. And I'd like to welcome one of our country's foremost leaders in colorectal cancer oncology, Dr. John Marshall, our great friend from Georgetown University, to share how Project Cure CRC will improve all of this for you. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much, and thank you everybody out there who has stuck it out. I have worked with the Colorectal Cancer Alliance since its inception, and I've seen firsthand how this organization turns urgency into action. Yeah, we've made remarkable progress in screening and early detection, but for patients with advanced disease, we haven't made the progress we need to. In the United States today, more than 50,000 patients are still dying every year. With new research investments, new clinical trial designs, new data sharing, and new patient support strategies, Project Cure CRC can end the era of too few treatments and too little time. Project Cure CRC brings together 4 powerful areas of work, each addressing at least one of the challenges Michael just described. They are Blue HQ, Blue Lake, direct research funding, and K-SPY. So let's dig into each of those 4 areas here for a second. First, Blue HQ. This is the Alliance's next generation patient support portal, launching in 2026. It's a trusted resource connecting patients to education, navigation, clinical trials, and community. Every patient who joins Blue HQ strengthens the ecosystem, feeding real-world data that informs research and returns as better care. It's the heart of a continuous feedback loop from patients to science, science to patients, and back again. Second, Blue Lake. Think of Blue Lake as the cloud for colorectal cancer research, an infrastructure connecting clinical, genomic, and real-world longitudinal patient data. This powerful data hub will give researchers and industry partners the insight to identify patterns faster and accelerate drug development. Third, direct research funding, so critical, particularly in today's world. Colorectal cancer has seen only one major frontline therapy change in 2 decades, just as Michael said. We are funding the scientists, asking bold questions about why this cancer resists treatment, how it spreads, and what makes it unique in younger patients. Already, Project Cure CRC has awarded more than $13 million in new research grants across the continent, targeting science that takes risks and rejects the status quo. And fourth, K-SPY, a new clinical trial platform, Modeled after the groundbreaking I-SPY breast cancer trial, K-SPY is an adaptive clinical trial platform that speeds up testing of new therapies. The first K-SPY colorectal trial will launch in January 2026. Our goal is to fast-track 2 to 5 new therapies to patients' bedsides. K-SPY's design allows us to drop in effective treatments quickly and add new ones seamlessly, saving years of time while saving lives. Together, these 4 components of Project Cure CRC form a living system of innovation, researchers, industry, and patients working in sync. As Project Cure CRC develops, so do the cures. But just as Michael said, we can't do it alone. We need every ally, every patient, every researcher to be part of this. And we thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. You've been instrumental in bringing Project Cure CRC to life. We're actually so close to seeing all the pieces come together into one powerful system for patients, a system that will save even more lives as it grows. So now, speaking of powerful, I'm thrilled to welcome our special guest, Katie Couric. Thank you for joining Curecast, Katie.
Oh, of course, Michael. So nice to be with you. And I just want to say thank you for everything you've done to increase awareness and about colon cancer and colon cancer screening. It's been really amazing to watch your work. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Katie. So I think most of our viewers will know why this cause is important to you, but maybe you could just touch on that. Obviously, you just, kind of celebrated the 25th anniversary of when you did the colonoscopy on TV, not for a good reason, but I'd love to hear, why is this so important to you?
Well, I think maybe some of your younger participants may not remember that in 1998, I lost my 42-year-old husband, Jay, to colorectal cancer. He was diagnosed 9 months before that. And our daughters at the time of his death were 2 and 6 years old. And needless to say, it was a devastating event for all of us and for Jay's family and my family and for our daughters. And it resulted in my learning so much about colorectal cancer, the fact that it was the second leading cancer killer of men and women combined. And I know you have some interesting things to talk about young onset and people under 50. But I also didn't know that it was highly preventable with screening. Jay, of course, who was diagnosed at 41, was too young to get a colonoscopy or really think about colorectal cancer. But in the course of dealing with his disease and his subsequent death, I really wanted to increase awareness and do something about this terrible disease and educate people on not only the symptoms, but also the preventative measures they could take that would ultimately save their lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you've played such a big part in obviously, making sure that people get screened, but you've also played a huge part in the advancement of treatments. What do you think, you mentioned young onset, but what do you think things that we still can do around screening and treatment of this disease?
Gosh, well, as you know, Michael, compliance for people who are 45 and over, and that is the age that now is recommended for your first screening, colonoscopy or any kind of screening. I know that Cologuard has come up with a stool test, and at first I was all about colonoscopies, and the more I thought about it, Michael, the more I came to believe that the best test is the one that gets done. So clearly we need to continue to talk people into getting screened for colorectal cancer and to talk to their doctors about it and to get that compliance rate up. Everyone needs to get screened. And as I said, I think a lot of people still don't know that the age has been lowered to 45. So I also think AI is going to play an important role in early detection, and that will not only be able to detect colorectal cancer at its earlier stages or earliest stages, will also perhaps be able to predict what patients may be at higher risk simply through going through millions and millions of scans and understanding sort of the biology of people who will get colorectal cancer. And in terms of treatment, honestly, there is a lot more to be done. I think immunotherapeutic options have been very effective in a number of cancers. I think it's just starting to show efficacy in colorectal cancer. Of course, Luis Diaz of Memorial Sloan Kettering. He had a trial where a certain subset of rectal cancers were completely cured with his approach. So this is the time where we need to spend more research dollars, not fewer, to try to come up with better treatments. It's so disconcerting. Michael, you and I have talked about the cuts to NIH and NCI and to all the major research institutions, just when we're at a moment where so much progress could be made because of technology, because of immunotherapy and targeted therapies. So I hope that we don't take our foot off the gas when it comes to new treatments.
Yeah, and I hope that Project Cure CRC can play a big part in that. One of the things, obviously, that I know that you are very passionate about is young onset. And what do you think some of the causes are here, or how can we potentially come together to stop this? Right, we got the #1 cause of cancer-related deaths for men under 50 and #2 for women under 50. So many people we've heard tonight from Diana and others as well. So what are your thoughts on what may be the problem and how can we fix it?
Gosh, as you know, Michael, there are all kinds of theories floating around, everything from microplastics to the prescription of antibiotics to food preservatives to, our diet, lack of exercise, alcohol. And I think, I even talked to someone, there was a study in Northern Virginia. My nephew, Ray, is an oncologist, and someone on his team studied elite runners. Yeah. And they found they had a much higher incidence of colon cancer, or at least why can't I think of the name of things before they become cancer?
It's polyps. Advanced
Thank you.
Polyps, yep.
Thank you. Or even early polyps. And so I think that, I don't know how I in the world forgot the word polyps, since I think about polyps and colon cancer all the time. But anyway, they're wondering if there's something about elite runners, marathon runners, that something is happening biologically to their bodies so I think the field is wide open, and we really need to focus on this. And that's why I'm hoping that we'll get a consortium of collaborative scientists who can work together, because there are people in their late 20s, their 30s, their 40s, like Jay, who are being diagnosed with this disease before there's any kind of screening strategy in place for those people. And it's so heartbreaking that these young people at the prime of their lives are being diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And I really hope we figure this out. Epidemiological studies, as you know, are notoriously long and tedious, but I hope that we really try to figure this out, because it's just incredibly upsetting. And Michael, the people who are getting diagnosed, as far as I know, they're not at high risk. They don't have Crohn's disease, or they don't have IBS, or they don't have, familial polyposis, or all the, what is the other one?
FAP, or familial adenoma polyposis, or Lynch syndrome. Yeah.
Lynch syndrome. They don't have Lynch syndrome in their family, and it's just completely out of the blue. So I hope that everyone feels this urgency to figure out what is happening here, because I read by 2030, the number of people under the age of 50 who will be diagnosed with colon cancer is going to double.
Yeah.
And that is such a frightening thought.
Yeah. Well, Katie, as Dr. Marshall says often, he'll say that a lot of these young onset patients are marathon running, cardboard eating individuals, and not necessarily high risk. So I just want to say a huge thank you for all that you've done. I know a lot of followers of colorectal cancer have seen you throughout the years, and I know we have a lot more to do, but I'm just really thankful to be able to talk to you today, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you to everyone who's taking part in this event, the people who are shining a light on this disease. For a while, people felt really uncomfortable talking about colorectal cancer, and I think it's so important that we've brought it out of the shadows, that we talk about it and talk about it with the sense of urgency that it needs right now. You know, as I always say, you know, there was a book when my girls were little called Everybody Poops, you know, and I'm like, everybody has a colon if they're lucky. And like the rest of your body, you have to make sure that your colon is healthy and that you're doing everything you can to make sure that to prevent colon cancer in the first place and then to detect it early. So I just applaud everyone here for shining a spotlight on this disease.
Thank you for everything, Katie. Now we're going to hand the microphone over to Dr. Benjamin Weinberg to lead our Curecast conversation.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Benjamin Weinberg and it's great to be with you. In this Curecast conversation, we panelists will share our own experiences, what we've seen, learned, and lived through around some of the challenges Michael mentioned earlier. These challenges are exactly what makes Project Cure CRC so critical. When we're brought together, researchers, clinicians, and patients really can achieve better outcomes. Let's start with a quick round of introductions. I'll go first. I'm Ben Weinberg. I'm a gastrointestinal medical oncologist at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Diana?
Hi, I'm Diana Zepeda. I'm a stage 4 colorectal cancer patient. I live in Arlington, Virginia.
Hi, I'm Mila Azad. I'm a GI medical oncologist at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland.
Hi, I am Lindsay Glassbell. I am a registered nurse and I'm also the clinical navigator at the Colorectal Cancer Alliance.
And I'm Marissa Leo. I was my husband Micah's caregiver. He passed away from cancer last year.
Diana, we can start with you. If you could go back to the beginning, when you were first diagnosed, if you can remember, what did it feel like to first hear the word cancer, and what sort of surprised you about the initial treatments that you received?
I do remember it clearly. It's been more than 8 years, but I remember how very frozen with terror I felt, and I think my natural instinct is to kind of clam up and process it alone, but there was no time to even process or think about it because the clock's already ticking once you've been diagnosed, and the clock's already been ticking, you just didn't know it yet. I was surprised how self-directed like a cancer treatment plan is. I thought all I had to do was be brave and have a positive attitude, but no, it was up to me to figure out as quickly as I could how to save my own life, and that's what it felt like. And, you know, assemble the right team of experts when I have no idea what I'm doing, and I felt very unqualified to do it, and I didn't even know what I didn't know. So did I do a good enough job, or did I only scratch the surface of my options? Should I have gotten a third, fourth, fifth opinion? You kind of kick yourself, but you do the best you can, and it's a very steep learning curve.
And Lindsay, you're often tasked with helping new patients navigate this really complex medical system, cancer diagnosis. What are the challenges that you find that patients face when you're talking with them?
Yeah, I think Diana said it best. When I talk to patients on the phone, a lot of the challenges are they were just presented this diagnosis, they get lots of medical terminology, test results, and then a treatment plan is given to them, all while they're still trying to process, like, I heard the words cancer, how do I get through this? But then also they get thrown into, well, we might need to look into clinical trials, you should get a second opinions, biomarkers, and it's so overwhelming for them while they're still sitting in the office hearing you had cancer. So I think it's one of the patient's biggest challenge in healthcare.
And Dr. Azad, you're obviously a busy clinician, researcher. What are the challenges that you face when you're meeting with patients, and how do you help them navigate this complex system?
You know, I think one of the things about the field of oncology is that those of us who go into oncology are really interested in connecting with our patients. That's why we made this choice to go into oncology. And it's a field that, whether you're an academic researcher like me, I see patients a day and a half a week, and the rest of the time I'm doing clinical research, or if you're in a community practice and you're seeing patients 5 days a week, everybody still wants to enroll their patients in clinical trials. We get referrals all the time, predominantly from people in the community. And so our entire research and clinical community is focused on both connecting with patients and trying to find new therapies. And that is somewhat unique in medicine, and a big reason that I'm sure you and many of us went into it.
Definitely. I think a lot of what we do, a lot of what we as clinician researchers we're looking for new drugs, new treatments for patients. We're tired of the same old, and the only way we make these advances are through clinical trials. And I think, Marissa, you had mentioned that Micah maybe wasn't as either informed or knew about clinical trials, and especially early on in his treatment course. Can you comment on what that experience was like?
Yeah, he was, I think a lot of what we're talking about today really does apply to his case. He was treated at one of the top hospitals in the country, but his main oncology team was completely separate from research oncology. So even if we did want to enroll in a clinical trial, it was a whole new round of referrals, a whole new medical team, a bunch of tests to make sure you qualify. And that kind of seemed like a scary jump, especially when maybe the opinion from your current team is you go through the standard of care before doing a clinical trial, almost as kind of a last resort when some of these therapies that are proven to work stop working.
Well, and I really want to comment on that, is that, it's very important for patients to understand that there are exciting clinical trials that can help people do better from the first minute that you're diagnosed. And you don't have to have an advanced cancer. Part of the reason that we have made such strides in earlier colorectal cancer and other cancers as well is because we've done clinical trials in people that are predominantly going to be cured, but we want to increase that cure rate even more. So I think it's very important for patients, anyone who's listening to this, to make sure that you're talking to your team about the fact that there are good options. And clinical trials earlier in your care almost always give you the complete standard of care. So you're getting everything you would normally get plus more. So we don't subtract, we add, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and a lot of what Dr. Azad and I do are early phase clinical trials with brand new drugs, often for patients who don't have standard of care options. And I think we see a lot of patients and we kind of wish we had good trials for them earlier on in their course had we met them earlier, right? And that there is this bias, not just us, but a lot of clinicians only refer for clinical trials when the standard of care options run out. And I think that's one of the kind of important misconceptions that we amongst others, that I think we need to dispel. And Dr. Azad, what are some other barriers that you encounter when you're trying to get patients onto clinical trials?
I mean, I think the biggest issue is that as a country, we don't have a great clearinghouse for people to learn about clinical trials. And that's true for patients, but it's also true for other doctors. Like if you're in the community seeing patients 5 days a week, there are literally hundreds of clinical trials in colorectal cancer ongoing. So how are you staying aware of that? And I think that's a real barrier, right? So I think what you mentioned also about just having a sense that you should wait to do clinical trials, that ends up being a big reason that people don't even try to access them. More and more though, insurance is covering clinical trials. It was actually a big part of the dialogue with Obamacare, and so most insurances do actually cover it, and so that's also important because people worry that they're going to be left holding the bag financially, and having cancer is really expensive, and it can really and it really hits a lot of people in the prime of their life. So.
Yeah, I find, in terms of barriers to clinical trials, that there are, on the one hand, patient-facing barriers, and then there's also doctor-facing barriers. On the patient side, there's, it's a lot of time, extra visits, may not live near a clinical trial site, may need to travel, may need to fly somewhere, right? There may not be a trial available, right, or a patient's not eligible for that trial for whatever reason. Trial was designed too stringent, okay? They may have other medical conditions that prevent them from going on the trial. And the big one is not knowledgeable about trials and that trials exist, period. And then on the doctor side, which we don't tend to think as much about, it's a lot of time and effort to open and put patients on trials. We're usually not really compensated for the extra time that it takes to put patients on trials and extra documentation that doctors have to do. with any clinical trials patient, when we get audited years after the fact to say, what happened to this patient on a trial, that's all a lot of time and effort that is not seen. And a lot of docs are also not aware of trials that are open. You mentioned the busy community doc who sees not just colorectal cancer, but everything. And they don't have the time necessarily to be looking up every trial for every patient in every line of therapy. But I do stress, and I mention this to our trainees, to clinicians, that anytime you're thinking about a new diagnosis, changing a treatment, you got to think about trials, right? Because often trials, you want to catch those patients where they are at the right time. And then, Lindsay, when you talk to patients about trials, what are some of the things that you hear from their perspective?
Yeah, I get a lot of patients that call in, kind of like you said, my doctor said I was out of treatment options. Now I should look at clinical trials. And it's really heartbreaking at that point because we really should have been looking at clinical trials. I always tell them a clinical trial should be a tool in your toolbox, right? Like when we need to pull it out, it's there for you and your doctor have had this conversation. So I always, if I get a newer diagnosed person, whether they've started treatment or not, I recommend them to at least start searching for clinical trials. I will help them search for clinical trials. A lot of the barriers with them is they don't want to be an experiment. Mm-hmm. They're scared. They think they're going to get a placebo, which in oncology, you're not going to get a placebo, but they don't want to feel like an experiment. And they don't want to feel like if they fail the trial, they are forgotten about. So a lot of my job, along with knowing the clinical trials out there, are just the education, being transparent with them, letting them know what a trial is and what a trial isn't. And really, if you do a trial, it's probably going to be your best care because they really watch you so closely that if that's what you want, a trial is great for you.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that a lot of it is that establishing trust. So it's nice to be a clinician researcher who also sees a lot of patients on standard of care therapies, and I've already, in many circumstances, already established that trust with patients. But that can be hard when you're getting patients referred to you who are new to you, because there is a lot of distrust and the concern about being a guinea pig or getting placebo. But I think, again, many folks should know that most clinical trials in the colorectal cancer space are usually not involving placebos. Those are really only ethical if there's really no other standard of care treatment. So they do exist, but they're kind of few and far between. There are concerns, I think, about what we call randomization, the coin flip. So there are trials where it's outside of the patient's control and the doctor's control what arm of the trial the patient receives, and that's basically left up to a computer. How do you help patients navigate those types of decisions when it comes to enroll in a trial?
Well, I think education is the most important piece, and going on any clinical trial, there's an informed consent process, and what that means is that we are super transparent about what could happen, what the options are, and what's going to happen if you get one of the coin flicks versus the other. Mm-hmm. And you can also stop at any time. Mm-hmm. You can stop before you even begin a clinical trial, that process. But kind of going along with all of this, I think that getting a cancer diagnosis is a serious diagnosis. And so I very much hold that any patient that gets a cancer diagnosis should consider getting at least a second opinion at a major center that does clinical trial work. Of course, everything is a matter of what you can do, right? I mean, there are, depending on where you live and what you're able to do. But if it's possible, and now more and more with telemedicine, it is more possible because some institutions do telemedicine all around the country. But at least hearing about all of these pieces and talking to an expert that takes care of just colorectal cancer in this setting, I think can really help set you up to be more informed for the entire time that you have cancer. I think very much like you were saying, Diana.
Yeah. And part of it also with the second opinion, third opinion is also the confirmation that you're on the right track, right? That you're getting the appropriate care, and that I think is also quite helpful. I mean, Diana, have you had much experience with other opinions, trials, things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I just really love my team, so I felt kind of disloyal to get a second opinion. And I think it's a lot of work. It was weeks of paperwork and sending so many like CDs and so much data they required for me to even get to the first intro appointment. But I did mostly because I didn't like the answer that was happening to me in my situation. And it was like you said, it was word for word the exact same approach, the same opinion, the same thoughts. And I'm like, was this a waste of time? But no, just just that validation of you were in good hands all along. There's a lot of guilt or just, I don't know, this anxiety that like, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So that was good and definitely worth it. And yeah.
I like, Diana, that you said you feel loyal to your oncologist and you feel bad getting a second opinion. I hear that on every call, like, but I really like my oncologist. And I'm like, that's okay, you can like them, but you can go meet someone else and you can all be friends together.
And
like,
we're not
you can
offended
like
either.
Yeah, they're not gonna be mad at you and it's for your best interest. So I love that you said that as a patient because I hear that every day on the phone.
Okay.
Yeah, and go.
I was going to say, in 20 years of doing this, I can maybe count on one hand when I've had an interaction with an outside doctor whose patient came to see me for a second opinion, who was in any way, guffed by it. I mean, it's a team, and I'm always happy to have an extra brain to help me figure out whatever's the best option for my patient. And I think broadly, we see that across the whole spectrum of people that take care of patients with colorectal cancer.
And I would go even further to say it's almost a red flag if your oncologist is
Yeah,
skeptical or not willing, for you to get other opinions, because that's very important. And I cannot do what a community oncologist do. I can't see 100 different cancers 5 days a week and try to stay up on all of that. I think it's impossible, frankly. And I think we work together in sort of a symbiotic relationship, and I can stay on top of my sort of narrow fiefdom of colorectal cancer and other GI cancers, but I don't expect them to do that. And then it's a nice interplay because then we can also treat patients where they live too. So if I don't have a trial that's attractive for a patient, there's no point in then schlepping multiple hours to come to Georgetown to get the same treatment they can get down the road. So it's important to build those partnerships and that patients understand that we're a team, right? We work together. We want what's best for the patient, right? We also do want to enroll patients on trials, right? Because that's how we make advances and that's how we get new drugs. Marissa, I know we talked a little bit about trials, but what other kind of experiences did you?
Yeah. Just like thinking back to what you said as barriers and maybe not being offered trials early enough, I do think just Micah's type of cancer disqualified him from a lot of things that were out there, whether that was just the metastatic nature of his disease, particularly his brain mets. He wasn't able to enroll in trials because of some of that, or stable scans. That was something that we were always chasing as well. I feel like we never really had that. And some of the criteria is you have to have some sort of stability in your disease, or there's just a lot of moving pieces, parts that I'm thinking, even like being here today, if we had done a trial earlier, could things be different? He was enrolled actually in a clinical trial probably a month before he passed. Unfortunately, I guess, we didn't have enough time to see whether that was working or not.
And that's really hard. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking, every time we put a patient on a trial, it's almost like all the stars have to align, right? Trial has to be open, slots have to be available. Even so we have sometimes a bunch of trials open, but there's no slots, right? Especially for these early trials. So slot has to be available. Patient has to be eligible. We had, patient has to have check all the boxes, right? And we have a whole host, an army of people helping us to make sure, we're checking all the boxes correctly, right? And then, and sometimes you get to that first visit and some blood work's, out of window, and and then we have to kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit, so that can be really hard and challenging. It's challenging for us as the investigator or clinician. It's really challenging for the patient, again, who's often invested a lot of time and energy just to get their foot in the door, much less jump through all the hoops, the scans, the biopsies, everything they need to get onto the trial. So those are all challenges, but I guess we have a couple minutes left. Dr. Azad, I mean, what are the, if you could change something in our clinical research infrastructure, to make more progress, I think we all agree that progress has been too slow, what would you change? What would you do differently?
I mean, I really would. I want to change the bureaucracy around clinical trials. And I think when I say that, what I mean is that it's at many levels. Our regulators, that's the FDA, like our regulators could make things easier for cancer patients because people with cancer that are looking at clinical trials are often looking at clinical trials as something that they're not looking to walk away from something that's great. They're looking to find something that could help them live longer. And so I think we should have a different metric for what we consider safe. And what I mean by that is that the regulators are they very much want to protect patients, but we have to balance that with giving people the opportunity to do things that might be out of the box. And then as investigators, we have to write clinical trials.
Right.
You were just talking about the ways that people get disqualified, and we are really moving towards taking away that disqualification for brain metastasis, for example. Why can't someone who has brain metastasis go on a trial? They deserve that. There's only a few drugs where it could be problematic. And so we've had to kind of relearn this lesson. We did this to people with HIV and AIDS. For a long time, we didn't let them enroll in clinical trials because we were worried about a theoretical drug interaction. So I think those are the things that I'd like for us to really analyze. What do we need, and only keep what we need? And in what we don't need, let us just move quicker.
Yeah, you stole the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, we have this boilerplate, like inclusions, exclusions, and trials, and we really need to get away from that to make things more inclusive and only have those for very specific reasons. Things you would change if you could wave your wand tomorrow, make our healthcare system, our cancer care system better. One thing.
I just want everything to move faster. It can't move fast enough. Since 2017, I've seen a lot of things change. Like immunotherapy was considered, not even an option for me. Now things are combining. Now it is. It's exciting to me, but it can't possibly go fast enough. I'm just hoping to stick around for it.
One thing you would change.
What would I change? Well, I hope for a cure, and I hope that we have more medications out there to serve these patients.
I think some of the things that we're doing here and talking about today, just having that education more accessible to patients, that's going to be great for people who are navigating things like Diana or like we were when Mike was first diagnosed.
And I think the big thing I think we all wish is funding, right? So that's partly why we're here, raising money for groups like the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, other philanthropic organizations. It's a very challenging funding environment for cancer research in the United States and globally, and none of these trials are free. They're actually very expensive to run per patient and overall, and it's very incumbent upon all of us to do everything we can to make trials cheaper, but also raise money because, again, we don't get any new drugs, new treatments without clinical trials. So thank you all for your important contributions today. We talked about patient support a moment ago, but now we want to share what it could actually look like in this video from the Colorectal Cancer Alliance. And watch out, you may see some familiar faces.
If you could draw a patient's path with colorectal cancer, what marks would you make? In black and white, you could draw hopeful pictures of people who color the patient's path. With light and shadow, your drawings become silhouettes of hope. With a flick of your wrist, your vision could spark change. You illustrate better access to experts and resources that can make a devastating diagnosis manageable. You draw not what is, but what can be. You shade the space between fear and hope, giving depth to every story. You draw connections to the latest science, bringing treatments from the nation's top laboratories to patients faster. You fill the page with purpose, bold strokes of compassion and care. You draw courage in every curve, resilience in every line. You sketch the caring smile of a patient navigator, helping to make order of disorder, turning the complex into progress for patients. Your drawings picture endless touch points of compassion, of progress, of care. Because your drawings show the future that we're making today. They show Project Cure CRC. And with every mark, we move closer to a world free of this disease.
First, thank you to our panelists, Dr. Weinberg, Dr. Azad, Lindsay, Diana, and Marissa. Second, I want to acknowledge our founding industry partners at Project Cure CRC, Exact Sciences and Natera. And to everyone watching this live or later on, we're grateful for your belief in this mission, your support, and your passion. The Alliance is a nation of allies, and you are a part of it. With you, we can make Project Cure CRC the revolutionary force it needs to be to end this disease. We have to, because today, patients and caregivers start at a disadvantage. They struggle to understand the basics, to find help, to get high quality care. And just when it all starts to make sense, the science isn't always there to help them. That's about to change. There are millions of reasons to get behind Project Cure CRC. So many are on this wall behind me now. My friend Marissa is going to tell you about one more.
Hi, I'm Marissa Leo, and I was my husband Micah's caregiver. Micah died of colorectal cancer about a year ago. He was 33 years old. It's still hard to talk about, but I know he would want me to. Micah was truly larger than life, 6'8", a former college football player, but somehow his spirit was even bigger. We got married a few months after his diagnosis, and I remember feeling so overwhelmed while coordinating his surgeries, treatments, and wedding planning. But his strength carried our wedding day forward, and that day remains a perfect memory in my mind. No one ever really knew the extent to which the cancer was affecting him, and he didn't want anyone to worry about him, and he definitely did not want to be treated like any differently because he had cancer. He always looked ahead with optimism, and still he and I knew it was serious. Stage 4 with liver and lung metastases. Genetically, Micah's tumor was one of the types that's difficult to treat. Chemotherapy and radiation alone were not a cure, and we were always told that if a new treatment wasn't developed, we would eventually run out of options. After his cancer spread to his brain, everything got 1,000 times harder. It disqualified him from a lot of existing clinical trials, and I don't think we were presented with these trials early enough to have made a difference. Through it all, Micah kept moving forward, brave, determined, and hopeful that something would come along. He even got a new job in the precision oncology space, hoping to help patients like himself. The week he died, he told us to bring his iPad to the hospital so he could get some work done. Since his passing, there are moments when I wonder if someone that good and that bright had even been real. But the hole he left tells me everything. Micah was a pillar in his family, a light to his friends, a beloved colleague. He would do anything for anybody. And I'm sad, I'm devastated, and yeah, I'm angry because my husband was young and healthy and full of life. He had so much left to give. But science didn't move fast enough for him. So I'm here speaking to you because I know there are other Micahs out there right now, and they deserve more time. After being diagnosed, Micah adopted a phrase he lived by: fight some more. I think of that now, and I see it as a calling to keep advocating for patients and pushing for research. Micah desperately wanted a cure, and I know he would now want that cure for someone else. Thank you for being part of it.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Berkey-Reefy, the Senior Director for Patient Advocacy and Alliances at Exact Sciences. Exact Sciences is a molecular diagnostic company whose purpose is to help eradicate cancer by preventing it, detecting it earlier, and guiding personalized treatments. We are proud supporters of Project Cure CRC and the hope it brings to colorectal cancer patients. This hope comes from research that will accelerate personalized treatments for colorectal cancer and the life-changing impact that will result. Thank you for joining us. We are glad you're here.
Hello, my name is Justin Yackel, and I'm with Natera Oncology. At Natera, we believe that every patient's cancer journey is unique. And to support that journey, we use an innovative technology to identify circulating tumor DNA on a molecular level to provide personalized insights that can help detect, monitor, and understand a patient's cancer journey every step of the way. It's a privilege to stand with Project Cure CRC and the Colorectal Cancer Alliance in advancing breakthroughs that will make a lasting difference for patients and caregivers. Thank you for being a part of this important event.